Hey everyone, welcome to what we've calling Talking Moscone this year. Talking Moscone. I'm Jason Bowman. I'm joined by Mike Pinozzo, publisher of Billiards Digest. Mike, 2020, it's been such a challenge. It's really turned everyone's life upside down in so many different ways. But as it relates to the pool world, it has really wiped every major pool tournament off the calendar from mid-March forward. Um, but there's still one big one that's hanging out there, and it looks like the good folks at Matchroom Sport are going to deliver us an early Christmas present by way of the 2020 Moscone Cup. Is this thing going to actually happen?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, cross your fingers. I mean, there could be something catastrophic in the next couple of weeks, but and we've all experienced tighter lockdowns in the last 4 or 5 days. They've had the same thing in Europe, in the UK. But Matchroom's in a good position because of all they do with other elite sports, with boxing, with snooker, darts, things like that. So they've got some pretty good sway with being able to work these rules where you can bring elite athletes into the country in a quicker fashion without 14-day quarantine, without this more direct testing, put them in a bubble, leave them there. They've been able to do this successfully with a number of events already, with a bowling tournament that they did, several snooker tournaments they've done. So, their reputation and their proven ability to get things done without any incident, makes it a pretty safe bet that the government's going to let them go ahead with this unless something else catastrophic happens in the meantime. So what this means for them is there's a lot of preparation that's going into this event, considering there won't be any fans.
Yeah, and so that's an interesting point. Is what so there's two things to me that make the Moscone Cup unique. One, there's the kind of the national pride team kind of concept thing, the U.S. versus Europe. But the other big component is that crowd, that audience that is so unlike anything else that we've seen in at least the pool industry. So how does is the Moscone Cup really the Moscone Cup without that crowd? What does that look like?
It looks like the football games you watch without a crowd. It looks like, the baseball games you watched without a crowd. So, it's the players, once they get into, performance mode, I think that it'll be just as pressure packed, that they'll feel that same pressure on each other, on themselves, to win matches, to score points. Obviously, Barry Hearn, the Moscone Cup is his prized pool possession, and he spent 26 years building it to this point where they were ready to have 3,000 fans jammed into Alexander Palace, screaming their lungs out for 4 straight nights. And that's, I really feel bad for them that this has happened. It's kind of taken some of the momentum away just when they were really starting to reach peak performance. But the show goes on, and we're thankful for that. I love that they're going ahead with the event. They've put, so many, the logistics in doing an event like this in a bubble with no fans is, I think most people would be surprised at how much more was involved, time-wise, cost-wise, things like that they would have never thought about. I mean, you're talking about having to bring people into the country at a time where airfares are really actually kind of high to travel internationally because there's so few opportunities, and then such strict codes when you get there, locking people down, putting them in a bubble. The entire Matchroom staff has to be in a bubble. The film crew has to be in a bubble. They've got to go through all this, and you've got to be nimble enough to make changes. If someone tests positive, you've got to be. So there's a lot of elements that go into this. So, this is one of those events that people won't see. It won't be obvious to people how much effort and time Matchroom has had to put into this to make this work. So I hope that, the players will love it. The players are going to play. They're going to compete hard. It's going to be, Matchroom does a great job of creating atmosphere, maybe where there isn't one. And so they'll do that. So I just hope that, everybody tunes in and watches it, because it's going to be it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a really memorable event and a very memorable year.
Absolutely. And like you said, Matchroom has some experience in putting on events during the pandemic. They've done I believe, a snooker event, a bowling event, and I know that you're pretty in tune with the bowling industry as well with your bowling publications. Curious what we can expect it to kind of look like. I mean, obviously we know no fans, but are we
Yeah.
talking just based on what you've seen with the bowling events? Are we talking cardboard cutouts like the baseball games? Are we talking
No,
piped in noise like the
no,
football games? What are we looking at?
I don't anticipate they're going to show any fake crowds. I tried to send them a poster cut out of myself to put in the front row. They didn't go for it. So, but no, I don't suspect you're going to see any of that. I think it's going to be more from dramatic lighting, crowd noise, walk-on music, things to get the play. One thing that's really going to be important for them is they've got to get the players pumped up. So they're going to have these players going out there who walk into an arena waving to an empty crowd, right? So, but they want them to be on the top of their game. They want them to be excited. They want them to be emotional. So they're going to have the work cut out for them just getting the players themselves pumped up. So I think it's going to be crowd noise, walk-in music, the dramatic lighting. They can make I've seen it with other Matchroom events where there really hasn't been much of a crowd, and you create this backdrop that's black with little stars, different colors, just something to add some element atmosphere to it. I'm fully expecting it to be out of the park.
Yeah, and so what I want to do today is we want to preview both of these teams this year. There's been a lot of changes to the makeup of both Team Europe and Team USA. We can start with Team Europe at the very top. The guy leading the team this year is new. Marcus Chomot had led the team, I think, for 4 or 5 years up until this year. Now we've got Alex Lely, and he's going to be co-captain with Carl Boys. Give me your take on the change in leadership for Team Europe this year, Mike?
On a couple levels, it's a really good move. I love Marcus. He was great. Marcus had a pretty easy job for the first few years that he was there. I mean, the talent there was just, trot him out and let him run. Even the last couple of years, Johan was captain. He admitted that he had very little to do with their preparation and getting them. He just got them out there, made the lineups, handed them their cue, and told them to go out there and beat America's brains in, and they pretty much did. So I think the last couple of years with Johan being in charge of Team USA and having Jeremy by his side, they really ratcheted up the level of preparedness by Team USA. And I don't think Team Europe was ready for that. And so not that they caught him completely off guard, but they were surprised to see a completely different team that they'd run over for the past 7, 8, 9 years. So it was time for a change after 2 years of losing. Alex is a great pick. He's such a smart guy, great instructor, great teacher. He was captain before I think the last time U.S. won, the previous time U.S. won I think in 2009 in Las Vegas, I believe Alex was the coach of Team Europe. And he's admitted that, back then he didn't really know the difference between just being a captain of a team and really being the coach. And I think he's taken that more to heart this year. I think he's much more prepared. I think he would have loved the opportunity to have actually had, a year of face-to-face dealing with the players in his hometown or wherever it was going to be. I think that was a missed opportunity that he really wishes he had. But I expect him to be really ready. I expect the team to be really ready. And, the couple of years that the U.S. won, it was funny watching European fans and players kind of become Americans, because whenever Americans lost, there was always an excuse. And the Europeans were such gracious winners. When they started losing, all of a sudden it was, buckets for pockets. And then the next year it was, your team has a captain and a vice captain, and our team only has a captain, and you have an advantage. And so this year they added the vice captain, and they added Carl Boys. Kind of a joker, but phenomenal player. He's like Jeremy. When you listen to them commentate a match, they're really good. They're really precise. They're really dialed in. They really know what's coming up. So I think that he's going to be a really good compliment to Alex as a vice captain. I think he is being in there as a player, a very successful player. He's going to know how to talk to the players. So there'll be that little buffer between the players and the head guy, which is always kind of nice. And I think that's a really good combination for Team Europe.
So new leadership for Team Europe, both with past Mosconi Cup experience. As you mentioned, Alex has led the team previously, and I know he's been involved in some on the broadcast level for a lot of the matches. So he's seen things from a little bit different angle. Obviously, Carl Boyes has played in several Mosconi Cups and has also been involved with some of the the broadcast of
Right.
the actual thing. So these guys have had kind of some different vantage points and kind of take that knowledge and share it with the team and guide the team. So let's jump into each member of Team Europe, and we'll start off with Jason Shaw. It doesn't seem like that long ago, Mike, that Jason was kind of the newcomer to the team, but now if you look at the makeup of the roster, it's almost like he's one of the veteran guys now. He's been around so long.
Yeah, it's a young team, which is scary because they're really young. Albin and Jason are the old guys. Jason, one of the best players, top 5 players in the world, especially when he's going, he's right up there. Last couple of years in Mosconi, a little uneven with his play. And I think if anybody's going to benefit from a lack of a crowd, it's going to be Jason, because I think the crowd is what bit him the last 2 years. I think, not that the crowd spooked him. I just think he got himself 2 years ago in 2018. There was no doubt that he got himself way overamped for a couple of those matches. And the key match that he lost to Skyler, he fouled twice in the same rack, and they were not, hard fouls. So I think that having him play at a little more of an even keel, but still maintain his emotions, is going to be a benefit for him.
That's an interesting take, because Jason is very beloved, especially when they're playing in Europe, and he really gets it going with the fans. So it's interesting that you think that's held him back the last couple of years, and it'll be interesting to see how he responds to kind of the different setup for this year's event without the fans. So let's move on. Clinty Catchy, this will be his 3rd year on the team. I think his first year, struggled a little bit. Last year seemed much stronger. Curious what you think about him being added as a captain's pick, I believe. As of course, 4 of the guys were captain's picks. So,
yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit about that after we undo the teams. But what do you think of Catchy coming back and being on his 3rd cup?
Get used to watching him. He's going to be on this team for a lot of years. He's just such a solid player, unflappable. The first year was a little unsteady. But last year he was, probably their 2nd best player. He's a really, really solid player, young, committed. And like I said, doesn't let a lot rattle him. So I think that he's going to be on that team for a long time to come.
Yeah, he out of the 5 is the one I'm most curious to see when you take out the crowd. How does he play? Because I felt like that 2 years ago, at least, that the bright lights and things might have gotten to him a little bit, the pressure of the kind of the venue and the situation playing in front of the European fans. So I'll be curious to see how he responds. Josh Filler, he was obviously a no-brainer, was obviously the best player for Team Europe last year, arguably the best player in the world. Of course, there's a couple other guys on Team Europe we could make that claim about as well. So, as I start to look down this roster too, Mike, it's like you've already got Shaw, you've got Catchy, now you've got Josh Filler. What does he bring to Team Europe in 2020?
Well, just a lot of energy, and bravado, and I think it rubs off on his teammates. I just think that they feel more comfortable, because I think that they really feel like every time he walks out there, he's going to dust whoever he's playing. And as a teammate, that's got to be a good feeling. It takes a little bit of pressure off of you, puts a little more pressure on Josh. I don't think he cares. I think he wants it. I think he wants all the pressure he can get. And he's just going to keep getting better, because he's another kid that's just really committed to the game. And he brings that great element of, for American fan, he's the guy with the black hat. So, you want that. I mean, you're looking for good television. You're looking for good drama. You're looking for people to show emotion. You're not going to get much out of Kachi. You're not going to get much out of Fedor Gorst. You're not going to get much out of Albin. So really, Jason and Filler are the guys who are going to be the big firelighters for those guys.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned both those guys, Shaw and Filler. And as you go back over the last couple of years, both of them had really notable matches head to head with Shane Van Boening. Of course, Shaw 2 years ago lost, on the first day to Shane 5-0. Stormed right back the next day, first match, and beat him 5-0. Of course, stood up in his chair. And then last year you had Josh Filler beating Shane, and I think his line was "There's a new king in town" or something to that effect. So.
Yeah.
Interesting that both of those guys may be kind of the emotional leaders of this Team Europe.
Yeah, they need that a little bit on their team because, like I said, you look at the other three guys, and it's you get maybe two words a week out of them. So, and you're not going to get any chest thumping, and you're not going to get not too much at least. So, I think they need some kind of fire to go with those level guys. So, hopefully, they've got for them they hope they have the right balance of fire and ice, and Filler's certainly right there.
So you've got Albin Ocean. He, was probably their best player 2 years ago when they were in London in Alexandra Palace. Probably would have been the MVP had Team Europe pulled that event off. But he was excluded last year from the team, I think, because of the way the team was structured. I think they had 3 that came through points, and then there was only 2 wild cards for the captain. So what does having Albin back on the team bring to Team Europe?
Brings a really good sense of calm and don't worry about a thing, I got it type of player. This is his kind of tournament. He hasn't done that great in the last couple of years in the big international singles events, but World Cup of Pool, the doubles, he's won a couple times. This event he always plays really well in. 2018, he missed 1 ball and it cost him the match against Skyler. So, he's just really solid. He loves this atmosphere. He loves doubles. Seems to play really well when he feels like, he's got to do things perfectly for the other guy or get the other guy out of trouble or whatever the case is. So he's, he'll be another guy who's a real calming effect for the other players because they just know that his record in Mosconi is pretty stout.
So the one rookie that Team Europe picks up this year, a really young player, but again, we're talking about one of the guys that you could argue is the best in the world, and that's Fedor Gorst, which is so Team Europe, Russia. I mean, is this? I had to look at the geography. I'm like, I know Fedor's from Russia. I guess part of Russia does fall into to Europe. But another world beater on Team Europe. Yeah, it's crazy the lineup. What does a young Fedor Gorst bring to Team Europe?
Another guy who's going to be there for a million years. A world champion, does not, another guy who's unflappable, doesn't show a lot of emotion, really, really solid player, determined player. He's a Johan prodigy. So he's, technically super sound. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play his very best this week because with all these other guys on the team, playing lights out or able to play lights out, I think if anything, he may feel pressure to keep up. I don't know that nerves are going to get him. I don't know. I've got a sense that I don't expect he's going to have one of those rookie MVP years like so many of these guys do. And I have no idea why. I don't think, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but, preparation and getting ready for this, I don't know what Fedor Gorst has been able to do in the past couple of months.
Yeah, it's a good point. We'll talk about that as it relates to all the guys because, obviously everybody's kind of been in different circumstances, but a lot of us have been at home, some without pool tables. So it'll definitely be interesting to see what young Fedor brings to the team this year. But Mike, as I look at this Team Europe, Shaw, Kachi, Filler, Albin, now Fedor Gorst, you've been following the Mosconi Cup for a long time. Has Team Europe ever, I mean, just in terms of name power and kind of where people are at in their game, is this one of the strongest teams that they've ever compiled?
No doubt about it. I mean, they had some great teams you know, the Brits were playing so well, when Darren and Carl and Chris Melling and, you know, those guys, but still, top to bottom, 1 through 5, this is probably the strongest I think I've ever seen. So yeah, I mean, if the US can pull this off, you can see some European players jumping off the London Bridge, I think, because you know, they've got to be the heavy favorite this year based on
Yeah.
lineups.
So Team USA definitely has its work cut out for them, as they do every year. I mean, let's be honest, every year it seems like it's going to be an uphill battle. So I don't know that 2020 should be any different, but it's going to start at the top for Team USA. Obviously, you know, 3 years ago, Matchroom brought in Johan Reisink, and he managed to really work miracles for Team USA, really turn the program around, taking home the cup the last 2 years. And in the last 2 years, also brought Jeremy Jones on. And now Jeremy comes in as the leader of Team USA this year. He's now charged with keeping on this level of excellence that Team USA has had. And he'll do it with Joey Gray by his side, who he's brought in as his vice captain. So if you could, Mike, just talk a little bit about Jeremy Jones as captain, and then vice captain Joey Gray.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, you know, Jeremy was ready for it, and he deserved the spot for sure. Um, he's such a smart player, so well respected, and very analytical. And you can tell, again, you know, watching him commentate matches, he's so spot on all the time. He's got such great analysis, such great insight, and knows how to articulate it. So if you look at, you know, team players, he's the perfect guy for them to be able to articulate what he wants them to do. He's not going to change people's games. He's just going to try to get the best out of them, get them more prepared for certain situations. He's very good at that. He learned a lot, I'm sure, under Johan the last couple of years about how to set up the lineups, how to, you know, I mean, the fleece job they did last year with working the system to come out with an advantage, what they clearly had. You know, I'm sure he learned a lot from that. So, and he's more relatable to the players than Johan was. Johan had his ways. Johan was, you know, he's a strict, stubborn European, you know, guy. Jeremy's one of the guys, but can be very, you know, forceful if he needs to, or calm guys down, or, you know, be strict if he needs to. They'll listen to Jeremy. I think the players would probably tell you that they prefer having Jeremy, just because of that factor of him being here all year round, him being able to talk to them all year round, seeing him at all the tournaments, being able to. I think there's just that another level of comfort there. So, you know, his choice was really good. His selection is Joey Gray. I didn't know Joey Gray any more than anybody else did, but, you know, I trust Jeremy's judgment, what he was looking for in someone to help him through this. And I think Joey, you know, what I do know of Joey, and having talked to him and met him and things like that, is that he's also a very analytical guy, very smart. He's an instructor, very into health and fitness and, you know, all that as well. So he was going to bring that to the team this year, which COVID pretty much put the kibosh on, which I'm sure all the team members were happy about, because I don't think any of them really wanted to run a mile on purpose. But but I think that he's, you know, he seems to be like a really good complement to Jeremy. And that's what you want. You want someone you're comfortable with. You want someone who's not just going to be a yes man because you selected them. You want someone who's going to challenge you on some of your ideas or some of your thoughts or some of your strategies. And if, you know, having that person, you know, someone to bounce things off of is really key. So if Jeremy's comfortable with him, I'm comfortable with him.
Yeah, it was interesting. You know, Johan seemed to, when he came in, kind of toughen the team up, right? You know, I mean, and you saw this really last year. I noticed it most. It was almost like they were kind of trying to intimidate Team Europe and in some of the pre-match things that they did. And, you know, and you could see like the team really embrace that kind of like, I don't want to say bully, but that's the best way I can describe it. They wanted to come in and, you know, it was their cup and you had to take it from them. Do you think they'll be able to retain that? I mean, like you said, Jeremy's a little more easygoing from what I can tell in my interactions with him. Do you think the kind of the composure of the guys will change? Do you think they'll continue to maintain that kind of, hey, this is our cup, you better come get it if you want it kind of attitude?
Well, they
Chip on
should be
their
able to
shoulder?
yeah, they should be able to maintain that because they've won 2 years in a row. I don't think they really had that attitude the first year under Johan. I think it took them a while to kind of get that or kind of believe in it, to have that swagger, that they were the tough guy in the room and you got to knock the battery off their shoulder. So, I think that they'll be able to maintain that. I think it might show in different ways because Jeremy's not, as volatile as Johan is. Johan liked to get, you saw last year with the press conference with Marcus, he likes to get in someone's face and tell them, I'm coming after you and you're not going to like it. Jeremy's not really that kind,
Right.
but he'll have his players thinking that same mentality. It just may show a little differently.
All right, so let's talk about Team USA and Jeremy and Joey, the team that they put together. Starts right at the top, the two-time defending champs, their MVP both years, Sky Woodward. Really, again, kind of the no-brainer there. He comes in after two very strong cups. Lots changed for young Skyler over the last 6 to 12 months. Obviously, he's welcomed in a baby boy into this world, and I know that's taken up a lot of his time, as it does for all new dads and moms. What does Skyler bring to the team? And, do you think any of the lifestyle change, pandemic aside, but just the lifestyle change of becoming a dad and all the responsibilities that go with that, do you think that has any impact on him and his performance this year?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. And that's something we're just going to have to wait and see how it plays out. 3 years ago, he had some personal distractions. After a really good cup 4 years ago, they were expecting a lot out of him 3 years ago in the U.S., Johan's first year, and he laid a complete egg. And you could tell he just wasn't all there. He wasn't right the whole event. Last 2 years, been completely dialed in. I expect him to be more of that completely dialed in guy, regardless of having a baby, moving to Texas, whatever the case is. He's become, a really, really great pool player. And so, last couple of years, he's as good as they've gotten as far as Mosconi Cup. When you talk about Mosconi Cup legends, Sky's got to be up there right now. The last 2 years, I was looking up, he's, forget the team matches, but in doubles and singles, he's 10-2 in the last 2 years. So, yeah. That's a pretty sporty winning percentage. And he wants the big match. I think he's taken some of the pressure off of Shane because now he's looked at as the go-to guy. I'm telling you, if they get to, 10-10, Shane is still one of the greatest players in the world, but just the mentality of what they've gone through in the last several years, I would think Team Europe, if it got to 10-10, they'd rather see Shane walk out there than Sky. I don't think I'd even want any part of Skyler Woodward at this point. So, and the Mosconi Cup just seems to be tailor-made for Skyler, his mentality, his approach to the table. He's the real deal. And for Mosconi, he's America's best player by a long shot over the last few years.
So let's talk a little bit about SVB. You mentioned him a couple times there. Shane Van Boening, again, one of the very elite, arguably, one of the best players in the world, if not the best. He's been on a lot of these cups. It wasn't until a couple of years ago that he really started tasting more of the victory side of things. But like you mentioned, with kind of the way that Sky has elevated his game, it's taken some pressure off Shane. And I felt like last year you really saw that. I mean, he had the match against Filler that did not go his way, but otherwise, he seemed very solid, very steady. What you really expected year after year from Shane, but sometimes wasn't there in the past. I think just because he didn't have that other anchor on the team. Do you think we see again a very comfortable Shane Van Boening this year?
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, I think he's hopefully he's ready to play and ready to go and wants some revenge. I think he knows that those guys are poking at him a little bit. Josh and Jason. He's played 4 singles matches against those guys in the last 2 years. 2 against Shane, 2 against Jason, and 2 against Filler. He's lost 3 of them 5-0. So, Shane can shake off a loss as well as anybody, but it's got to be somewhere in the back of your head, you would think, right? If you're a player, I know it's in the forefront of Jason and Joshua's mind. So it'll be interesting to see how they do the lineups this year, to see if they try to keep Shane, a little bit away from those guys. Shane's not backing away from any fight, but if you're the captain, you're gonna, and you see what's coming up ahead, you may want to put Skyler in a couple of those bigger situations. So, when Shane's been able to play Kazakis, something like that, no problem. So
no Kazakis this year, unfortunately, for Shane, because he is owned Alexander Kazakis.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see which Shane shows up this year and how he plays. They're going to rely on him because they have in the last couple of years. As I mentioned, I think I mentioned before when we were talking that last year Billy Thorpe beat Jason, and that was the only point that the U.S. won that didn't involve either Shane or Sky or both of them. So, they're going to need more help from other people, but they're still going to rely on Shane and Sky to carry the load.
So you mentioned him there. Billy Thorpe makes his fourth. I believe this will make his fourth appearance in the Cup. He's been on the team the last 3 years. Obviously, Team USA winning 2 of the last 3. So he's, unlike some of the other guys that have been around a while, he's experienced a little more success in the Mosconi Cup. And what I love about Billy and what he brings to the team is, he brings that emotion that you see from Shaw and Filler on the other side. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. He really gets going. And, he seems to perform well when he's kind of in that mode. So what do you think of Billy as part of Team USA this year?
I expect a lot out of Billy this year. I think he's just gotten better as a player in the past year. I think he's ready to play. And, we talk about these, points that you got to get from somebody other than Sky and Shane. The last 2 years, Billy's the only guy other than those two of the Americans who's won a singles match in each of the last 2 years. So that's where you need for these guys to step up. You need to get a couple of singles wins out of Billy. You need to get a couple of singles wins out of Justin Bergman to take some of the heat off of Shane and Skyler. Doubles matches, I'm comfortable any doubles match that Sky or Shane are in with anybody. They'll help that player be better and get through the match. So, to me, I look at it, what happens when they're on their own. And Billy's shown that he can play under pressure. I think one of the things that Johan really did well with Billy, and it'll be interesting to see how Jeremy has learned from that, is that Billy is really an emotional guy. And so Johan, one of his coaching philosophies that he shared with me with some of these players and the mental approach is that if you're a real high-strung guy, you got to hold it back in during the match. If you're a guy that holds everything in during the match, you got to go out there and be a little more vocal to get, to have that get a little bit out of your system. So you noticed last year with Billy in that last day match against Jason, which was such a huge match at 8-7, they started the day off. Billy beat Jason and you didn't see Billy, move a muscle until that last ball went down, and then he exploded. And I think he learned a lot from that. So we'll see about what that looks like this year. I think Billy's, he's a guy I'm expecting a lot out of this year from US.
Nice. Let's talk Justin Bergman. Justin has been a member of Team USA a handful of times, was the last captain's pick last year, kind of a late selection, kind of a dark horse, if you will. I think everybody thought it was between Corey and maybe Max Eberle, and suddenly Johan goes to Justin Bergman, brings him back on the team after he had missed the year prior in London. And I felt like last year the verdict was still kind of out on Justin. I mean, he had some moments that were very good. I know he had that tough moment on believe it was the third day, the last match. Not necessarily his fault, but you do wonder, because he didn't get a chance to play on day 4. Does that stick with him, and how does he respond? I mean, typically Justin comes across as very cool, very calm, very collective. I mean, perhaps the most emotionless of the entire team. What do you expect to see from Justin Bergman this year?
I don't know what I expect. I know what I hope for. I mean, I actually, have a gut feeling that he's going to play really well this year. And really, for him, for Team USA, really well would be if he can win a singles match and a couple doubles match and pull in 3 points. That would be good. If he, so he's really a great player, really underrated as far as how good a player he is. But the Europeans know it. The ones who've played him, the ones who've played in tournaments in the U.S., seen Justin Bergman play, know how good he can be. He just needs to be able to show it in a race to 5 and hold it together and win some critical points. He's kind of my dark horse pick this year for the guy who's going to steal a couple of those key matches that you need.
Nice. We'll keep an eye on that, and then hope you're right. Final member of Team USA, and I think it took a lot of people by surprise. Young man named Chris Robinson out of California. It was interesting. I had to go back and kind of look into Chris, and come to find out that Chris was actually playing APA leagues not that long ago. And it was actually at our, obviously we didn't have a tournament in 2020, but was even in our championship in 2019. So look at a guy that has progressed very quickly from one stage to a whole nother level. What do you think about the addition of Chris Robinson this year, the rookie on Team USA, and really the most unproven, I would say, of the team?
It reminds me a lot of when Johan picked Tyler 2 years ago. Kind of the same thing, kind of out of the blue, doesn't have any national big wins under his belt, but a guy who's steadily improved, has shown the ability to take instruction, make his game better, make changes he's got to make to be better, totally devoted to the game, totally devoted to learn how to play. So the same thing was kind of the same thing with Tyler a couple of years ago. Johan really took a shine to him and kind of followed him and coaxed him along and just thought, I know he doesn't have the pedigree, but I just like where this guy's going. I like his temperament, and I think that he can do well in there. He's, and the same to me, I think Jeremy saw the same thing in Chris Robinson, and how he'll do. Everybody's up in arms and this guy hasn't won anything, and how can they not pick Corey Deuel and yada yada. But he's quite obviously the number 5 player on the team. And if you look at the last couple of years, they haven't asked a lot of the number 5 player on the team, and they haven't gotten a lot from the number 5 player on the team. So that being the case, like Tyler last year won 2 points, both in doubles. Got beaten in singles matches, lost another doubles match, whatever. He didn't play great pool. Even the one of the doubles match he won, I think Shane had to pretty much drag him across. But so it's all about expectations to me. And with Chris Robinson, your expectations are just go in there, do the best you can, steal a point or two. If you can steal a point or two, we're way ahead of the game. I like his temperament. He's a super nice kid, super hardworking kid. Listens well. I think he'll be a good teammate. So, it's interesting, and this is probably a little bit off topic, but you have to put yourself in Jeremy's position too. I was like, why did Jeremy pick Chris Robinson? I tried to analyze it, pick it apart myself, and I'm probably overthinking it, but he's had 2 years under Johan, and US won twice. There was a different player on each team. Tyler was on the first year with Corey, then Tyler was on the second year with Justin. So they really haven't had the same team 2 years in a row anyways. Now, if you're Jeremy and you're coming in under Johan's shadow, and the expectations are you've won 2 in a row, if you go with the exact same team and lose, does that make you look like you're not as good as Johan? If you go, so I just wonder how much was in Jeremy's mind is like, I'm going to bring my own team in here. I'm going to bring a team in here that hasn't played yet. And this is going to be, my stamp is going to be on this team. And we'll see how this team does. Because I don't want to get blamed for not being as good as Johan if I lose. And I don't want anybody to say, well, he won with the same team Johan won if I win. So, for all I know, Jeremy never thought any of that, but it went through my mind. So I just wonder if any of that played into it. And I do think that he has a lot of confidence in Chris to be able to perform well. And I think, Chris is another guy who the lack of crowd's going to help. You're not going to have, And if it was in the U.S., different story. You'd have a lot of support. But if you have 2,995 out of 3,000 fans in that arena, blowing smoke in your ear, it's going to rattle your head a little bit. So I think that, the lack of a crowd will allow him to play a little bit more like he's just playing in the pool room.
Right.
So, I'd love to see him do well. I'd love to see him steal a point or two. And I think it could be a huge springboard for his career like it was for Tyler's.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison, and there's probably something to what you said about wanting to inject some new blood into the team, and hopefully Chris can bring that. I'm curious with him in particular. There haven't been any pro events, dating back to March, and I'm curious how well the guys on Team USA are, how familiar they may be with Chris Robinson. I mean, is there some level of anonymity that maybe helps him because they just haven't seen a lot of him, or are they all very familiar with Chris in a way that maybe just the public is not?
Yeah, I think that they're plenty familiar with him. I mean, Chris has been, last couple of years after he left Lindenwood, he was at Lindenwood for a year playing under Mark Wilson, and then he decided to just, skip the college route and just go play in the pro tournaments. He's been to all the big tournaments, and he's played in all of them. And he's won some good matches, and he's lost some close matches against top players. They know what Chris plays like, and they know what his personality, his makeup is. I think they're comfortable with him. So like, again, I think it's probably the same as when Tyler went in a couple of years ago. It's, you're just going to have to say, okay, there's one of my teammates. How do we all hook arms together and go in there and fight this out together? Because we're teammates.
Yeah, so I'd love to see him have a kind of a Tyler Steyer moment. If you go back to 2018, Team USA day one, down 2 games, and you've got a matchup of Niels versus Tyler Steyer, who at the time not a lot of folks knew, and Tyler just stepped up and got a huge win for that team. Really turned, who knows what happens with the Cup that year without that win, and chance there for Chris, right, to step in and potentially fill a void. And so will be interesting to see how he progresses in his first Mosconi Cup experience. I'm curious for all of the guys, I know you follow a lot of these guys on social media. I follow a lot of them on social media, seeing kind of what they've been up to since March during the pandemic. From what I can tell, it doesn't look like a lot of them have played much pool. Certainly there hasn't been a lot of competitive high level pool to be played. They may have access to a table here or there, but how much is that going to affect the level of play that we see in this year's Mosconi Cup? I mean, are these guys going to come in ready to go, I guess, is kind of what I'm asking, because they just haven't been able to kind of refine their game the last several months?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, we'll just have to wait and see how the level of play is. I don't know. I'd be surprised if it's as crisp as it was last year or the last couple of years at the Cup. But these are still the best players in the world, so it's not going to take them long to get in a good stroke and to get mad at the guy that they're playing and to bear down and that type of thing. I think from the standpoint of playing, I think I'd probably give a little bit of the edge to the U.S. in preparation, just from the standpoint that at least you've been able to travel around the U.S. In Europe, those players haven't been able to leave their own countries, very little. And not until recently. In the U.S., they have been able to play around the country. And last, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, Texas Open, all these top players were there, and they were hammering out. And I just think that maybe shook cobwebs a little bit from some of the players get a little rust off their game. You had Shane was in that epic race to 120, whatever it was, match with Dennis Ercolo. That had to be great preparation. Justin Bergman was in action, a lot, in the middle of the summer, later summer.
I imagine Justin's probably been in action for the last eight months or whatever, however long we've been. It doesn't take him long to find a game. He loves to gamble. So
yeah. So from that standpoint, I think guys have at least been tested, have at least been pushed, have at least had a little pressure on a couple of shots. I don't know that any of the European players have. And, they may not need it. I mean, they all shoot so damn straight. But I think the U.S., they might come out, if they think about that, they might come out of the gate a little bit stronger, a little more aggressive, and maybe put Europe on their heels a little bit. So we'll see if that holds true.
So we've heard you mention Team Europe looks as strong as maybe they've ever looked in terms of their roster. You've now mentioned Team USA maybe has the slight edge in terms of having some preparation, specifically the Texas Open that you mentioned a few weeks ago. I'm curious if we can get an early pick. And I'm not saying you got to stick with this pick 2 weeks from now, but sitting, what are we, 10 days out or 12 days, however many days out we are.
Yeah.
I'm curious if at this point you feel like, does Team Europe take the cup back this year, or does Team USA find a way to prevail for the third year in a row?
I'm going to pick USA 11-9 again, like 18. I think it'll be close throughout. In 18, I believe they were behind it, or no, they were front runners the whole time.
Well, 18 they started down the 2 matches on day one, and then they ended up winning 3-2.
They won 3 in a row. Yeah, so they were up. They led the entire time in 18. They actually trailed the first day last year. So I think if they can get off to a good start and shake some of the nerves, shake some of the cobwebs, and show that they're in there, I think that we talk about whether there's going to be a crowd there and how that's going to affect play. It could help the U.S. at the beginning. At first blush, it might seem that the lack of crowd would help Team Europe because U.S. seems to really feed off the crowd well. And Jeremy mentioned to me that that the event's going to feel like a Euro Tour event with no fans in it. He says the Euro Tour events are pretty much funerals with pool balls on the table. So if that's the case, then the Europeans may shoot very straight. Who knows? But I think that if the U.S. can get off to a good start and put the Europeans on their heels a little bit and show that they're not going to back down no matter how good Europe's team are, I think that they've got the horses to do it. They're going to need some help from Billy and Justin for sure. You can't expect Sky to keep a 10-2 pace, go 5-1 every year. So, you might have to have someone pick up one of his games. If he loses one, you might, so there might be some situations where your main guys lose a match or two, and it's going to be up to the other guys to step up. And I really think Justin and Billy are in the position to step up and take a couple of those points that other people were taking for granted.
Well, there you have it, folks. Billiard insider Mike Panozzo with an early prediction for Team USA 11-9. I know the hometown fans, our viewers, are going to like hearing that, Mike. So you made the crowd happy today, at least.
Yeah, I don't want any calls and letters.
Yeah, we'll check back in a couple of weeks and see if anything has changed. But as it stands today, like we said, folks, it looks like the 2020 Mosconi Cup, although it may look different, is going to happen, and it's going to be happening December 1st through the 4th in London this year, and it is available for viewing on DAZN.com. That's DAZN.com. That's a streaming platform, and I think it's maybe $29.99 per month.
$19.99.
Yeah, $19.99. You can just sign up for the month, and then I actually did this last year, and then unsubscribe after the event's over. Save yourself some money, or you can continue to subscribe and watch all their boxing and the rest of the Matchroom events, which will hopefully be forthcoming in 2021. But again, that's December 1st through the 4th, and Mike and I, along with a couple other friends from the billiard industry, will be getting together each day of this year's Mosconi Cup, and we'll be bringing you another segment of Talking Mosconi. That'll be December 1st. We'll get on here after the matches conclude the first day and just kind of give an assessment of how the first day went, what we saw, maybe analyze a few shots here and there and that kind of thing. So I'd encourage you guys to tune in. Mike, I appreciate you joining us today. It's always a pleasure to see you. It's been a while. Hopefully, eventually, we're seeing each other face to face, not these clarifying calls, but I think it's going to be a little while longer still. But I look forward to seeing you again December 1st as we really dive into this year's Mosconi Cup. And folks, hopefully you guys are looking forward to it again. You can catch it on DAZN.com, and we will have coverage here on the APA Facebook page. So until then, we are going to say goodbye for a little while, and thank you for tuning in.